All right.
Thank you very much for joining us here on the Voice of Job Seekers Summer Series. This is a video series that I'm doing on just to add some more value and more information to your tool belt for your career. I want to introduce you to Ozias Washington. He is a career coach for Wheaton College. How are you?
I'm doing well, Mark. Thank you so much for having me.
Not a problem. And I don't get a chance to talk to many. Well, that's not true. I talk to a lot of college um, career coach from colleges. I don't have them a lot as far as a recorded conversation. So you'll be the first in a while. I want to have a couple of them on, but I just wanted to get an idea for you. First of all, before we get into the bevy of questions, what was it like in having to change gears when the COVID-19 became apparent and everything was going to shut down?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I don't think I'm gonna say anything unique to my colleagues that were in career centers across the nation. But something that as I reflect on, that time, three months ago or so, when
Mm-hmm.
our whole office had to transition from being, on campus to going virtual,
Mm-hmm.
a couple of things stood out to me, at least three things. Number one is uh, I saw that our office was much more innovative than I gave it credit for.
Mm-hmm.
So as soon as we got the notice that we were going virtual, uh, that same day we all got in a conference room under our director's leadership, and we
Mm-hmm.
started reimagining what the services that we offer our students, what do they look like virtually.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was one thing. The other thing too was, although it was extremely hectic because we had 2 days to pivot to be virtually, and we already had at least two major events that were scheduled to be put on campus. And so
Mm-hmm.
the big task was, how do we get that? How do we deliver those same events, but on a virtual platform? So we had to
Right.
reimagine that. So
Mm-hmm.
to answer your question, it was hectic, but our team came together and used the innovation in those different platforms to execute, the high quality stuff that we typically do on campus.
Right. One of the things that I think it was really important to understand as well and get a sense of, graduates are really affected. And um, things were happening probably when maybe your traffic to the career center was
Yeah,
increasing because of people
yeah.
are looking for information, looking to gain an edge of the competition, uh, and get some traction on their career plans. So what was it like for them to transition, in your estimation, for what you can tell?
Yeah, for sure. Mark, I think you're absolutely right. The graduating class of 2020 was most definitely affected very differently than other classes.
Hmm.
But so what we did in that case is many of our events that we did right during the shutdown or stay at home, was a lot of our programming was directly tailored towards how can we best assist our seniors. And so we came up with some pretty cool programming that spoke directly to their needs at that time.
Hmm.
So answering questions like, okay, what jobs are hiring, what industries are hiring, how do I articulate my cover letter now in the age of COVID. So there's a lot of things that we tried to do that made sure that it was COVID related, and how
Hmm.
they can use those tools right then and there at that moment. Because as you know, I mean, there were graduating seniors who had job offers, and then they got rescinded because of
Yes.
COVID. There were people who had plans to do like a gap year, but those things got rescheduled, and they had to figure out, what's the best use of my time doing that. So
Mm.
it was a lot of brainstorming and making sure that we delivered programming and content that was relevant to their specific needs.
And I'm sure it was a shock, and I'd be interested in hearing the strategies that you had to use to pivot for those who spent that time studying specific industries and to see them collapse before their very eyes in real time. Uh,
Yep.
um, how, was there any way to kind of reshape their experiences? If so, what were maybe one or two things that were helpful to them that maybe worked for them, or maybe you had to kind of bump up the talk about resilience and being
Yeah.
more persistent?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. So for those students who, as we would say in our office, had a little less runway to, prepare for landing a job because, they didn't know COVID was going to happen and it shut down everything. So
Right.
their prep time was even more limited. And so what our message to those students was, we are still available. We made sure that that we were accessible, that our office was accessible to them just as much as it was when it was residential. So that was one of the primary conversations. The other one was, we were very proactive in doing this campaign, what we call real jobs. And what that means is, our director teamed up and got a lot of our alumni that had opportunities that they knew were available. And
Mm-hmm.
so we made sure that we shared those opportunities, with our students.
Good
So
deal.
although they had a shorter runway, but now we're saying, hey, we've connected with alumni, which our alumni are extremely generous and are willing to help
Mm-hmm.
a fellow Wheatie. And so that was very helpful for them, because now they are applying for jobs that they know that are real, like,
Mm-hmm.
opposed to applying to a job on a website and not knowing if it's still posted, where they're at in the hiring process. So those were just two of the things that we did to make sure that those seniors know that we were still there for them.
Right. So, of course, some of the job strategies have to change, and they're continuing to change as the market begins to experience some tumbling
Yeah.
and implosion still. Um,
Yeah.
how are they, if there are things that you're going to be changing coming up in the fall, as far as your advice, um, what would be a couple of things that you would tell them now that maybe you didn't think of last fall?
Yeah, I love this question. So this, so there's three things that we're changing, or that we're including in our conversation with students. Number one is, know your personal situation, and
Hmm.
what we mean by that. So there's some students, who they have to have a job because they can't. They have to pay their own bills, or they
Right.
have to pay rent. So this whole idea of, like, you can wait or you can be picky. For some students, they don't have that opportunity. And so what we're saying is, know what you really need at this point.
Hmm.
If you have the ability to wait, 6 months before you actually start pursuing, that's great. But you need to know that.
Yeah.
But there are some students where it's like, hey, I've graduated. I need to start working yesterday.
Right.
And having that perspective is really going to tailor, the types of jobs that you can take and that you're willing to take. The
Hmm.
other one is, know who's hiring. Again, as you already seen, like, there are some industries that are booming, and there's some industries that are tumbling, as you put it. And our good friend Andrew Seaman has a blog on LinkedIn. If you just type in hashtag get hired, he has a lot of great resources to help you understand, like, who's hiring out there and keeping you up to date on those current practices. And the third thing that we would say is, like, be flexible.
Hmm.
And what I mean specifically by that is, again, like, us as humans, like, we get fixated on, hey, these are my plans. This is what I'm going to do, and we move all of our resources towards that. And as you said earlier, things are changing, in some industries moment by moment, in some industries second by second. And so the encouragement is to be flexible. And what that looks like for someone who's looking for a job is, let's say you're not finding the job title that you want. But my encouragement would to be is say, look at the tasks that are being done in that job, because maybe those tasks are meeting the need that you would want to have in the future job. Like,
Mhm.
this is not going to be a something that you're going to have forever, but maybe you can accept this job because of the couple of tasks that you will be doing, and you'll have to forego the job title that you want, and let's try to hone some of those particular skills within that job that you'll be doing. So those are three of the things that we're trying to communicate differently with our students.
Yeah, I was going to ask another question, but you kind of answered it already about the toughest part of trying to coach students at this particular time, because a lot of them use filters to take advice. That's what young people do, right? That's what I
Right.
did many moons ago. Is that I began to start to customize the advice. Sometimes it didn't even fit me, as opposed to
Sure.
now I can customize it because I know me better. But when you're
Sure.
young, you're 20, in your 20 somethings, maybe
Yep.
even in your 30 somethings, and you still don't know you. And sometimes that advice can go to waste because you think that it wasn't essential.
Sure, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think when you look at, or when I survey what we do holistically for our students,
Hmm.
we have this thing called what we call a blueprint model, and basically we're asking the student to look at themselves holistically. What are your skills? What are your interests? What do you value? What have you explored in the past? What
Hmm.
internships you've had in the past? What kind of informational interviews you had? And so all these things. Hopefully is to help the student to look a bit more strategically as far as what are they aligning themselves up for as far as
Hmm.
opportunity. But to your point earlier, Mark, the most difficult thing during this time is like really helping students to pivot from what they were expecting to
Hmm.
revisioning what is now, right? And
Right.
so for some students, it's easier than for others. But my encouragement is, let's continue to pivot. And if you don't get this opportunity, reevaluate and start again.
Yeah.
So it's not the time to throw in the towel. Because I think, and I would be curious to hear your thoughts on this. I
Hmm.
think, during this time, some recruiters or employers, one of the questions that they will ask is, "What did you do during the COVID era?"
Yeah.
Right? I feel like that's going to be like one of those top questions. Like, tell me about yourself, and then the next one would be, "What did you do during COVID?" Um, and I think for those students who have the ability to not have to seek full time work now, like, what other skills can you be honing in on?
Hmm.
Are there, can you brush up on your Excel? Can you learn more about some of these softwares? And I think being able to do that and show those different badges on your LinkedIn profile will be super helpful and help move the ball forward for many students.
Yes, my perspective has been, um, you should be doing dozens of informational interviews.
Okay.
Uh, as a graduate and even as a freshman, or you begin wherever you are, your first years, it should be doing tons of informational interviews. I can't
Mm,
help but to think that time after time I've talked to graduates and how much intel graduates get from informational interviews. And even as a professional, I mean, people think it's got to be this big production number, and it really doesn't have to be. They could just be
mm,
10, 15 minutes. And quite frankly, you can have 3 or 4 in a particular day if you're intentional and you're scheduling, and you're strategic. But all in all, it is about the pivot. And employers want to see you be resilient,
yeah,
I think, because they know that there are going to be times when even in a work situation, there are going to be times when you'll have an obstacle, and they want to see you either go about it or move around it or move the obstacle.
sure.
And sure, I don't make it sound like an inspirational speech, but in someone's hiring head, and having done a bunch in my day, um, I'm interested in, can this person be, like you mentioned, be flexible? Can they be persistent? Can they be persistent? Can they be resilient? Can they have practice courage? Can they be patient?
Mm,
Which is another big one, because you look at some of the studies today, where some of the surveys today, what hiring is taking now, it's taking a lot longer now. Back again,
yeah.
the whole process can possibly take 60 to 80 days, with
Wow.
not even hearing from the hiring manager for the first 35 to 40 days. It varies amongst industries, but it, through recessions like the last one and in 2008 and this one, employers slow down, and they're
Mm,
cutting budgets and they're cutting all the fats to it, and they're trying to picture what business is going to look like in the future, especially now that a worldwide pandemic could come into play at any time.
sure. That's super helpful. Thank you so much for sharing those thoughts.
Sure, I that wasn't in the plan.
No, it wasn't.
But I've had talks where employers and some of the videos before, they're really concerned of what the future of work is going to really look like.
Yeah,
When we've had studies since 2012, 13, and 14 to show that remote working was part of that future,
right,
and we didn't know that it was going to be like right on time. Uh,
right.
so I think people, the quicker you pivot and more creative you're going to be, the better you can probably appeal to an employer to show how you did it and how quick you did it. It's tough. It's
Yeah,
tough.
yeah.
So, Ozias, thank you very much
Mm,
for joining me. Ozias, that's Ozias.
oh, that's right.
I keep, I'm gonna have to go back to school. But if people want to contact you, can they contact you on LinkedIn?
Absolutely. I'm most definitely open to collaborating and networking with people from various industries. So please hit me up if you want to chat.
Good deal. Ozias Washington, thank you very much for joining me. Wheaton College career coach, and thank the rest of you for joining me. Um, I'll be back in a few days with another video and another interview. Have a great day and a great week.